Hello, welcome to the Wildline podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. Today, it's Star Wars weekend, right? Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker came out. We're going to do sort of a deep dive on that and see how well it performed. There's also a ton of other movies to talk about. We are in the two busiest weeks of the year here. The last 2 weeks of the year. We got holiday movies, we got Oscar stuff coming out. Bombshell went wide. And then we have all these holdovers like Jumanji, Frozen 2, Knives Out, Ford vs. Ferrari still sticking around. So we're going to sort of talk about everything that we can, but a majority of the show is going to be focused here on the Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker opening. Get straight to the headline. What are the current numbers? If you follow this stuff, you saw stuff coming in over the weekend. $90 million, I think, for Friday, plus the previews there. So 50 on Friday, 40 on the Thursday previews. The Saturday numbers came in, and they weren't looking super strong. So early on the weekend, it was looking like $200 million opening weekend was kind of off the table when we got those preview numbers. And as of yesterday morning, Deadline was basically saying, and most people were saying probably low 190s, 190 to 193. Deadline was saying like 193 plus. And then the sort of later Saturday numbers came in and they did not look good at all. So the official guess right now for Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker is $175.5 million for the weekend. So $175 million. So what does that mean? Is that good? Is that bad? On an aggregate amount of money, that's fantastic. That's a really amazing opening for a movie. $175 million is, obviously top 20 opening all time. It didn't really reach the height of, say, Avengers Endgame, which was in the 340 something, the biggest opening of all time. Not even really close to Force Awakens, which was in the 240s to something, 247 or something. What the hell is it? I have to look it up now. It was, 247. I was right. Or Avengers Infinity War, which was in the same sort of realm as that. What's happening here? I think overall it's a solid performance, but it's definitely an underperformance from expectation. So if you just looked at it as a normal movie with the production budget that it has, you'd say, okay, this is good. This is going to be profitable. But the fact that it's in the Star Wars universe and, it's at Disney and there's all these sort of narratives going around. And I think the big thing, sort of the elephant in the room with Star Wars, is that it has become this cultural friction point in America, at least, where it has brought out perhaps not the best in group dynamics in terms of people arguing for the film, against the film, what the film stands for. A lot of social politics are getting involved. And this really, it started a little bit with Force Awakens. There was sort of, when that trailer dropped, there was just sort of some back and forth about, who is the lead character and why. But it really took off, that cultural friction took off with The Last Jedi. And it would be really hard to parse out why it's happening. But it really has become this sort of stew of cultural conflict, where, here in America, overseas too, like Brexit in the UK, there's just a lot of social hatred going on, almost like feels like the early stages of like a civil war, where you have these two different sides and camps. On the one side, you have people who, might be called progressive, liberal, the other side would call them maybe social justice warriors, stuff like terms like that are getting thrown around. You have that side of things, who I think kind of supported a lot of The Last Jedi sort of changes to this sort of story arc and vibe of Star Wars. And then on the other side, you have the more sort of traditional, maybe some are alt-right, some are trolls, who are sort of attacking the Star Wars trilogy as being too political, as being maybe like overly feminist, and I don't want to necessarily, split the entire audience into this, but those are two warring factions in this sort of cultural stew, and Star Wars, the Rise of Skywalker, is right in the middle of it. Now, should it be? I would argue absolutely not. It's just a movie. But movies are cultural productions, and those things tend to create conflict sometimes when people aren't happy with each other. And that's where we're at politically and socially in the United States, at least. So Star Wars is in the middle of this sort of, mini civil war that's happening. And, if you try to discuss the performance of Star Wars, and if you go onto like Box Office Theory forums or you go into Reddit, or you're in a Discord or something like that, you're going to see this, that there's this clear sort of ideology, especially on the hatred side of things, that just started sniping at the movie left and right. And I can't really figure out why. Like, why is it such a big issue that Star Wars is going in a different direction, or Star Wars isn't a carbon copy of the world you created in your head for these group of movies? I don't get it from an emotional perspective, but it's out there and it's massive and it's incessant. And like, look no further than channels like Midnight's Edge or Geeks and Gamers. They've just been basically an attack industry on Star Wars, Disney, and Kathleen Kennedy, who's obviously the producer here. So it's a really weird environment to talk about this movie. It's hard to parse out performance from that social conflict. It really is. Because if you say anything negative, all of a sudden you're alt-right Nazi. If you say anything positive, you're a fanboy zealot who has no rationality whatsoever. Like, that's kind of the camps that have sort of formed over this. And so it is hard to sort of pinpoint performance here, but we're going to try and do that here. So let's think about it contextually and holistically, this performance. $175 million is not bad at all. It's a good, solid performance. This thing is going to make money worldwide. The issue here is that it is an underperformance to expectation. Number one, tracking. Disney said tracking was 165. Conservative tracking was 170, but most tracking put it between 180, 190. Even Deadline themselves, as of 24 hours ago, was thinking 193 for this thing, and then all of a sudden it fell off the face of the earth Saturday night. So why did that happen? That's strange. That's, they're $20 million off on their numbers. That doesn't happen very often. So something is happening here where the performance is not sort of living up to expectation based on the data itself. So to contextualize this, let's just think about what has happened with Star Wars over the last 4 years. So obviously Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, the first in this trilogy, directed by J.J. Abrams, opened up December 18th, 2015, basically the same sort of weekend as this. It opened at 247, ended up making $936 million domestically, is the number one sort of movie of all time domestic. Internationally did 1.1 for a worldwide box office of $2 billion. Now, eventually, the Avengers movies beat that, but it was sort of the number one movie of all time. Well, I guess was Titanic higher than that, or Avatar was higher than that? So throw that out. But $2 billion worldwide, basically the grand slam of grand slams. Bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, down 3 runs, grand slam, home run, you win the game. It was just amazing performance, unbelievable. And the key to that was not only, if you think back to 2015 when everybody was sort of guessing how was Star Wars going to do, the hype was so massive back then that we couldn't even conceive of a $247 million opening weekend. Now with the Avengers movies, everything's sort of changed, especially with Endgame earlier this year. There's just all rules have been broken, so we don't really know what's possible anymore. But back then, this was sort of the unimaginable opening of $247 million. It was insane and awesome to follow and track. And even more insane than that, to be honest with you, is the domestic total of $936 million. Like, that level of a multiplier. This thing just played from December all the way through basically Valentine's Day and crushed the entire time. It'd be one thing if it opened at 247 and sort of fell off a bit. That would have been normal, like a front-loaded sort of fanboy run there. But no, everybody went to go see this 4-quad movie. Everybody loved it. Everybody saw it multiple times. I saw it 3 times in the theater, and I don't even know if I like it that much. It was just such a spectacle that everybody wanted to see. So the first, Star Wars, new Star Wars movie was a huge success across the board, one of the most successful films of all time. So 2 years later, we get The Last Jedi. And in between that, remember, we had Rogue One come out December 2016, which performed okay. It was an offshoot story, not part of the main thing. I think Rogue One is one of, if not the best Star Wars movie I've ever seen. You can sort of at me wherever you want to. I don't care. It's, I think, the best written Star Wars movie. I thought it had a beautiful story. I thought it was well acted, well constructed. And I think it had the best, it clearly wasn't the grandiose main story, but there was something about the smallness of the story and the focus of the story that worked really well for me. In any event, that was sort of the off year 2016. 2017, we get Last Jedi. That opened, 2 years ago, 2 years after Force Awakens. That opened to $220 million, so already kind of off the original. And that's fair because the original was the most hyped movie in 30 years, it felt like, maybe even 40. It was just insane. Last Jedi didn't really have that same level of, hype leading into it. So it does 220, closes out, a good, not even a 3x multiple, $620 million domestically. And then worldwide as a total, 1.3 billion. So off $700 million from Force Awakens. Is that surprising? Now that's when the cultural friction started. Rian Johnson directed The Last Jedi. What had happened is that he took the movie kind of in a different direction and a different tone. And I think what he was trying to do is to make this trilogy have its own sort of voice, its own sort of vibe. Kind of like, honestly, the prequels did. The prequels did really feel like a different group of movies than the original trilogy. And I think that Rian Johnson did that, and maybe Disney decided to do that, and Catherine Edwards decided to do that. Catherine Kennedy. Catherine Edwards is a Canadian singer-songwriter. She's fantastic. Go listen to her. I think what they had decided as a group is sort of maybe like, let's give this a unique voice. The Force Awakens, for all the money that it made, was a nostalgia trip. We all know this. It was a lot of fun. It was spectacle. It was great to see on the big screen. But there was nothing really new there. And I think everybody deep down knows that it wasn't that unique. And so I think with The Last Jedi, they tried to create a more unique sort of storyline and narrative arc to this trilogy. And the reactions were, I don't know, like the audience scores were very high. The Letterboxd score wasn't that low. So the film nerds kind of liked it. And I think that like they gave it a 60 out of 100 on Letterboxd, which is okay. But I think there was a group of fans and a group of people that decided that The Last Jedi was terrible and they wouldn't shut up about it for the last 2 years. And so that has helped create this conflict. And so when The Rise of Skywalker opened this weekend, there was already this built-in animosity towards the film. And so that's why it's a little bit hard to sort of pinpoint this underperformance. Why is it happening? So before we dive into that, let's just get through the base numbers of how this thing is doing with audiences and stuff like that and who went to go see it. And then I'll give us some more context. So Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, obviously J.J. Abrams directed. Rotten Tomatoes score, 58% from all critics. Not very high. 62 actual score. Not very good, especially for a blockbuster like this. That's pretty bad. Top critics, even worse, 49%, 63 actual score. So right there, we already have a problem. The critics don't like it that much. Now, do critics matter? 100% they do. And people argue this all day long. Critics are the first people to see the movies. They're the first people to get their thoughts out on social media and on Rotten Tomatoes. I guarantee you the moment these dropped, which was like earlier last week, I think, that cut down pre-sales without a doubt. That they were basically saying this is not a great movie. At least a 10 to 20% cut down on pre-orders tickets. A verified audience score, 86%, 86 actual score with a ton of tens of thousands of ratings. All audience down 77%, 79 actual score. A cinema score of a B+. This is where it gets fascinating. So critics don't like it that much. They don't necessarily hate it, but they don't think it's good. Verified audience score says people really liked it and enjoyed it. That's the same score as John Wick 3, similar score to Joker. Both huge movies this year. So audiences who bought tickets on Fandango who rated it 86% out of 100. So called it good. So not that bad at all. All audience score, a little bit down from that, but like I can't trust all audience score because it's all basically bullshit. The Last Jedi was one of the so that's a sort of contextual thing we can talk about. The Last Jedi all audience Rotten Tomatoes score is one of the reasons why Rotten Tomatoes added the verified audience score. Because what happened with The Last Jedi is all these alt-right Nazi people, for some reason, chose The Last Jedi as their hill to die on, went to go brigade the Rotten Tomatoes score, so it sat at a 49%, when all the actual surveys from audiences put it at more like a 90%. So clearly it was being brigaded by a group of haters and trolls, and so that's one of the reasons why Rotten Tomatoes said, hey, this isn't working. We need to have a verified audience. Only people that buy tickets can rate this movie, and that's where we get the 86% here with A Rise of Skywalker. A cinema score of a B+ is fascinating, though. It's the lowest of any of the new Star Wars movies. It's lower than Solo, which came in at A-. Most of these movies are A's. And so that cinema score is interesting, though. It's only like 5-7 cities that do these surveys. It's voluntary, I think. Oh, it has to be voluntary. They're not going to force people to take a survey. It's voluntary, but it is in person, and they do verify. Obviously, these people have seen the film, so that's very helpful and a good set of data. It just seems like 5 markets. Come on, like that's not really a lot. So as much as I love CinemaScore and it's great, it's not necessarily the best way, I think, contextually to view it between different movies within CinemaScore is a lot more valuable than taking a CinemaScore and sort of applying it to the total audience, because I don't think that works as well. Post-track 80%. That was updated, I think, last night on Deadline. 70% definite recommend. Massive, huge, good numbers. So already mixed story. Critics don't like it. The people who saw it on the CinemaScore markets didn't like it as much as the other Star Wars movies, but everybody else seems to like it a lot. Post-track of 80% is great. 86 actual score from American audiences. So the audiences don't hate it at all. They actually really like it. Letterboxd score was 60 out of 100, not very good. Star Wars Last Jedi, like I said, was a 68 on Letterboxd. Force Awakens was a 74. Rogue One was a 72, and Solo was a 62. So it's lower than Solo, which kind of matches the CinemaScore. Now, that group of people, obviously, film nerds, film snobs, film students, and stuff like that, they don't really like it that much, which you'll see a lot of correlation between Letterboxd and film critics, because Letterboxd is essentially people who want to be film critics. So they don't really like the movie that much, but I think the audiences are enjoying it. And this is someone threw this out on the box office theory forums. How is this going to do worldwide? How does it compare to everything else? Essentially, what's going to happen is the Avengers Endgame worldwide weekend will be over 3x more than this Star Wars Rise of Skywalker worldwide weekend. And they're both global releases at the same time. That, I think, is sort of the biggest story here. $175 million is good. It is definitely an underperformance to expectations, without a doubt. It's not nearly as high as, The Force Awakens was 247, Last Jedi was 220. This is down to 175. It's going to struggle to hit $600 million domestically. I think $1 billion worldwide is pretty much locked, I would think. But it's kind of a question mark whether it's 1.1, in that, like, how far over 1 billion is going to get. Is it just going to make it? That's kind of a question. That was not something we thought we would be asking ourselves a week ago. So something is off about this performance. And I think that stat that the poster put on Box Office Theory forums is great. This is going to be, Avengers Endgame was 3x the opening weekend worldwide than this. Star Wars is no longer the super strong IP brand that it was when Force Awakens was released back in 2015. And I think that is sort of kind of a bigger issue that we'll get to. Let's get through some more audience stuff, and I'll hit that on the backside. Males, 67% of the audience, female, 33%. What the fuck? Like that, that's bad. Like, you cannot have a 4-quad movie that's supposed to make $200 million and have 67% of the audience be male. Now, normally an audience is like 55% male, 45% female, average movie going audience. But for a movie like this, you need a much higher female representation in the audience. And that, I think there's a lot of posters have been talking about, like, why did that happen? Why did they lose the female audience? Rey's a main character. She's essentially like the Mark Hamill character, or Skywalker character, whatever. In this trilogy, why are they not showing up for her? That's a big warning sign to me that it's just, and maybe it's like fanboy opening weekend, but it's so outrageously skewed towards men. Under 25, 34, over 25, 66. That's an average movie going to audience right there, like down to the actual percentages there. That's what you normally get at a movie. Guys over 25 were 43% of the audience. Males under 25, 24%. Females over 25, 22%, and females under 25, 10%. I think, the biggest sort of warning sign there is not over the overall female number, but females under 25 didn't show up. Only 10% of the audience. You're going to need them to be a lot higher than that. Essentially, what you wanted to do here with the audience is take anything. There's an overabundance of men over 25 and an underabundance of females under 25. You wanted to sort of swap those a little bit and take some from that over index group and put it to that females under 25. So that's, I think, where it has failed here as a $200 million opener. Not failed overall as a project that's going to be profitable, but not nearly what Disney wanted out of this. Females actually like the movie a little bit more. This is all from Deadline, by the way. They gave it an 84% rating versus men gave it an 80%. The over 25 set liked it more than the under 25 demographic. In terms of racial ethnic breakdown here, 56% of the audience was white. That's kind of in line with a normal movie. Latinos were 19, down a bit. African Americans was 10%, down a bit. Asian other was at 8%, down a bit as well. So just a little bit over index on the Caucasian white audience here. Okay, so that's the straight numbers. Let's try and give you a story about what happened. So a couple of takeaways. If we start out with this sort of the thesis that this is an underperformance, it's not bad. It's a solid performance, but it's an underperformance expectation into what the current sort of marketplace looks like for a $250 million production budget film. So it did not break the $200 million mark. And there's a couple reasons why. One, the females didn't show up like I just discussed. You need an audience that is, more of 55% male, 45% female, or like kind of the reverse. You need that to be more evenly split. They just didn't show up. The age breakdown, the only thing alarming there is that you wanted younger people to show up for something like this. The fact that over 25s were what they were, especially the male audience, means that this was more of a fanboy movie. This is more a movie for people who were around when the first Star Wars was coming around. I just don't think that Disney has passed the torch to the younger millennial or even Zoomer generation for this film. And I think that's one of the bigger mistakes here. Whereas with MCU and Avengers, the young people, anybody under 25 loves those films. And to me, that almost seems like the core demographic for those films. And that's why they made $250 million opening weekend. That's why I made $350 million opening weekend for Endgame. So I think those are two problems right there. And I think just like, the fact that it's only going to do a third of what Endgame did, it tells me a story that the Star Wars brand is nowhere near what it was 5-6 years ago. Force Awakens really started this thing out right. Now, I don't think that movie was fantastic or great, but it was fun. It was magical. It was a spectacle. And as much as I don't want to wade into the Last Jedi minefield, I'll say this. Like, I saw Force Awakens a few times in the theaters, parents, friends, anybody I could take to go see this is so much fun. Like, it did feel like a theme park ride. When I had to go see Last Jedi, I kind of expected the same thing. I got tickets. I think I got a group of people who came back to Wisconsin to go see it at the Ultra Screen, which is like this cool, awesome screen in Wisconsin from Marcus Theaters. It's their flagship, majestic movie theater in Brookfield, where I grew up. And bought tickets. It was expensive. Got the popcorn, did the whole thing, the recliners. It's like kind of like a mini IMAX situation. And it just like, I went out of my way to do that, to make it a social event. And I went there and we watched it and I was like, that was boring. I fell asleep. It didn't have any of the magic of Force Awakens. It didn't have any of the magic of the original trilogy. Was it a fascinating movie? I think, yes, if you approached it as just a normal film, but most people approach it with the lens of Star Wars. And so Rian Johnson and the sort of the decisions to take the film narrative trilogy in that direction, I think were a huge mistake. Because at the end of the day, what we want out of Star Wars is the same thing we want out of a Jurassic Park movie, which is the same thing we want out of an Avengers movie or an MCU movie. We want a spectacle. We want a theme ride. We don't necessarily want it burdened with stuff that you would see in like Uncut Gems or like The Portrait of a Lady on Fire. It's cool to add those more artistic elements in there. But at the end of the day, we want a very specific experience. And The Last Jedi, I don't think, delivered on that. Now, the early audience scores on that were pretty high. Letterboxd scores were high. Critical scores were high. But I feel like there was a bad taste in people's mouths. And then to sort of exacerbate that was the cultural conflict around The Last Jedi, where it was just basically people bickering back and forth about the movie. Instead of just saying, hey, it wasn't really my thing, it was like, hey, this isn't my thing, and this is the death of America, this movie. I mean, that's essentially what people were saying. And so it became this weird political conflict, and all of that bad taste has sort of settled on The Rise of Skywalker and why it's only opening to 175 instead of $250 million, instead of $350 million like Avengers Endgame. And I think that's, to me, that's the story. It was just a combination of Last Jedi not really scratching the itch that a lot of us had for Star Wars. And I think the cultural conflict that was sort of layered on top of that. I don't even know how connected those two actually were. I don't think they were really connected at all. But they just sort of got layered onto this sort of just awfulness cake. And then, Rise of Skywalker comes out and people just aren't hyped to go see it. It doesn't feel like an event anymore, right? It just feels like, yeah, I'm going to go see it. I'm going to go see it. But it almost feels like I'm clocking in, clocking out. Like I have to go see it because it's the end of the Star Wars trilogy. I think in a lot of ways it reminds you when people went to go see Revenge of Sith, which I thought was the best of the prequels. But it kind of felt like I'm just obligated to go see this. I'm not like super excited about it. And that's sort of the vibe I get with Skywalker. Okay, so that's sort of my take on Skywalker. Where do we think this thing is going to go? It's already way behind the other two, obviously. Does this thing make $600 million? Well, let's take a look at the sort of numbers here. 175 it's at now. 3x multiple gets it to 525. Oh man, this thing's gonna have a rough time, I feel like. $600 million. The multiple on Last Jedi was sub 3. The multiple on Force Awakens was massive. Maybe this will sort of follow that a little bit more. I gotta look up the multiple real quick on Force Awakens. It was 3.78, 3.8-ish. So, is it gonna have something like that? So let's say the high end of this is that it sort of repeats that multiple. So that gets us 665. And then if it does 3x, it gets us to 520. So already have a guess for you where it's gonna be. It's probably gonna be between about 520 and I would say 620, somewhere in that range. I don't think it's going to have the legs to match at all Force Awakens. It is J.J. Abrams, so maybe he has that sort of magic touch to get people to come back more and more, but I just don't see it with this one. It's a different sort of type of hype. So, I think between 620 and 520, I would guess closer towards 600 million. And then in terms of, billion, I don't know. I guess why am I thinking a billion's not going to happen? Let's just be conservative and say it makes $550 million. Usually the breakdown for these films, is about not 50%, but definitely closer to like 45% domestic. So $1.2 billion. So yeah, $1 billion is a given at this point. I don't know why I was questioning it, because people in forums, so you get these trolls. This is the problem. You get these trolls who come on and attack the film, just like blindly attacking the film because I don't know why. Their daddy didn't love them or something like that, and they feel like they have taken on other people. And like it just skews your perspective, because people are saying on Box Office Series forums, which is a very nerdy forum, for like people who are super into this stuff. They're like, oh, $1 billion may not happen. Those people are idiots. Like, of course it's gonna happen. So $500 million is a lock, obviously domestically, and that makes $1 billion a lock worldwide. So I don't know why it was ever a discussion. But that's I think it's probably gonna end up at like, let's say 580, 600, right in that realm. Then I'd say about $1.2 billion worldwide for this one, unless it really falls off internationally, which I don't think it will, because there's not as much cultural sort of conflict around the film in other places. Okay, is that all I have to say about Star Wars? Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, that's, it's one of those movies where we just have to spend a ton of time talking about, because it's such an important part of the movie theater industry and history and box office history. So it's one of the deep dives we have to do. But we'll keep an eye on Skywalker and see how it does over the next few weeks here. It's going to play strong all the way, I think, probably through the end of the year. Probably all the way through January. But we'll see where it ends up compared to the other films. Okay, let's keep this train moving. Jumanji: The Next Level was number 2, $26 million, a 56% drop. Little high for me. This one's probably not going to have the legs of the original. Let's try and take a look here and see where it stands with the original right now. So it's at 101 here domestically. I think that it really took off, right? That opening weekend was fantastic. And I think that it might be a little bit on the front loaded side. Okay. Yeah. It's, interesting. It's way behind, way behind the first film. So the first film on its second Sunday was at 169. This one's only at 101. So what's funny is it sparked off higher, right? It took off right away with that $60 million opening versus the $36 million opening of the original, but now it's starting to lag. But the silver lining here is we're not to Christmas yet. And this week now, most people are going to be off the entire week because Christmas is on a Wednesday. And then New Year's is on a Tuesday maybe, or a Wednesday? I got to check that. So that it's on New Year's Day is on a Wednesday. So most people have that off, and New Year's Eve. So we have a potential of like a good week and a half of just straight movie going. So the next, I don't know, 12 days, 11 days are going to be insane in terms of daily numbers. So I think the next level is going to make up a lot of that, but it's fallen quite far behind now. So we'll see. We'll see where it ends up. Is it going to make the $404 million the original? No fucking way. Not going to happen. Just not going to happen. Which is expected as a sequel. The first one was kind of lightning in a bottle. It really depends on how the last week here, getting into New Year's and stuff like that. And then January, the key for that movie is probably going to be January. It's not going to be the end of December here. It's going to be how it plays over the winter, and the sort of post New Year's malaise that we usually have. We're going to get dumped with all these amazing genre films. I can't wait. It's going to be so much fun. Like Underwater. Like, what the hell is that? So Jumanji is doing okay right now. We're not going to be able to tell, though, unfortunately, until New Year's Day, how this thing's going to play out. But it is behind the original. Frozen 2 down 36%. That's a great drop. That's a drop you want to see. Sitting at 386 right now. This one, it's been a quietly great performer. I think nobody doubted that this thing was going to do well. I think there was some doubt about is this thing really gonna be as massive as people had hoped? Where's it stand versus the original? Original did what, $400 million domestically. This is already at 386. This is gonna blow past that. I mean, just blow past it. And so, worldwide, it's also gonna be massive too. It's already over $1 billion worldwide easily. That'll easily surpass the 1.2 billion. I think it looks like, of the original. So this is it's just one of those it's a quiet Grand Slam is what it is. They waited a long time for this one, 6 years, but I think it's going to pay off, and especially because of the next 2 weeks here at the box office. So great performance for Frozen 2. Let's take a look at the rest here. Oh my lord, I almost forgot about this movie. Cats. Cats. From Universal. Did $6.5 million this weekend. Per theater average in over 3,300 theaters. $1,900 per theater. So Cats, I could talk as long about Cats as I could about Star Wars, but I'm not going to do that to you guys. So let's quickly hit the numbers. Obviously, Cats is a huge musical, I guess from the 80s, right? Andrew Lloyd Webber. It has been sort of a cultural joke. I mean, it was a huge joke on Seinfeld back in the 90s. It's just sort of been this joke. What is it about? Why is it so pop? It's just sort of been this mysterious musical that people love for some reason, but nobody knows why. And so the movie kind of felt with like a shoe-in as an adaptation, and especially with the cast, Taylor Swift, James Corden, a lot of other amazing people are in this. You would figure it's like a given home run. But it has been one of the most disastrous productions and rollouts I've ever seen of a major film, ever. Rotten Tomatoes score, 19%. 38 actual score, one of the lowest I've ever seen, especially for a major release. Top critics, 21%, also 38. Verified audience score, 62% with a 70 actual score. Terrible. All audience, 48% with a 46 actual score. Horrific. Cinema score for C+, terrible. Post-track, 40%, the worst. No definite recommend score. Critics hate this, audiences hate it. Letterboxd, 36 out of 100. Compared to The Greatest Showman, which is not a film favorite of film snobs, 66 out of 100. La La Land, 80 out of 100. Mary Poppins Returns, 66 out of 100. So if you're a mediocre musical, and like Greatest Showman, 66 out of 100 is kind of the film snob breed. That's not that bad. This is at 36. Like, there is no audience that this works for. It doesn't work for middle America. It doesn't work for the cosmopolitan people in big cities, doesn't work for the film critics, and doesn't work for the film snob. So it's a total epic disaster. Thinking about the bigger story about this, when the trailer rolled out, it was one of the funniest moments on Twitter of the year. People freaked out because the fur technology, or whatever the hell they called it, a digital fur technology, and the term that got thrown around was the uncanny valley, right? That's when you try to represent a human being through CGI, and it just looks close enough, sort of close to a human, but far enough away where it freaks you out. That's kind of what happened with the trailer here, and the look of the cats, the human faces but cat bodies. It's just so bizarre, and it's that sort of meme hilarity of making fun of the movie has just followed around like the most rank stench you could possibly imagine. I mean, there's no way you can come back from that, and it hasn't. And there was a thought process though that like, okay, it's reached such a meme territory where everybody knows about it. Everybody knows it's insane and bonkers. Does that translate into the sort of ironic postmodern audience going to see it to sort of laugh with it and make fun of it? Is going to be the new Room? Probably. But is it going to make $100 million at the box office? Absolutely not. This will be playing in midnight theaters. I guarantee you within a year, it's going to be like the new Rocky Horror Picture Show or the new Room. But it's not going to make any real money here. Audience was 34% male, 66% female, which makes sense. Production budget was about $90 million. So they're going to lose money on this. It's also going to hurt a lot of careers. Like, this is not a good look for Taylor Swift. The older people in it don't care because they got a paycheck. James Corden probably doesn't come off too well in this either. So it's just one of those messes that you just want to go away. I'm sure Universal wants it to go away, and Tom Hooper wants it to disappear. So female audience under 25 was 37%, over 25 was 63%. That's a little bit surprising that the under 25 showed up, a little bit more than normal. I kind of have to wonder why, because cats, would be more popular with people my age or older, they're mid to late 30s or older. Post-track scores here, over 25, females over 25 was the biggest quad, 39%, females under 25, 26%, males over 25, 23%, males under 25, 11%, which totally makes sense. If you'd sort of guessed that going in, that would have made total sense. Very white movie. 67% of the audience was white. Only 10% was Asian other, 9% Latino. That's really low. 9% African American is a little bit off an average movie. And the thing that Deadline calls out here is it had a massive viral rate. These trailers and clips on YouTube and stuff, 28-1 viral rate. The problem is it was all negative, and Deadline rightly points that out. Like, this was one of those films that everybody knows about and everybody's making fun of. And so what do you think the end result is? No one's going to go pay money to see it because it's a joke. They're going to wait to see it on like HBO or Netflix or whatever. So just a total epic disaster. There's not a lot of sort of broader narrative I can add to it. It was just a failed concept from the start. You wouldn't think so though, because it was a huge Broadway play for so many years. Like, how is it still going? Like 20 years or something, 30 years. But I think it should, it's one of those things that like works better, I think, in live theater in a Broadway setting, musical setting, because you're kind of up for it. I don't think people were really up for it. And just go read the reviews. Some of the funniest writing this year has been Cats reviews from major film critics. Like, audience reviews are fine, but like the Guardian review specifically is just off the wall and hilarious. I think the Independent or somebody wrote, maybe it was the Guardian, wrote the review in verse. It's just one of those calamities that sort of brings out sort of the joy and schadenfreude in people, and to see this thing kind of crash and burn as a disaster. Okay, so that was Cats. There only did $6.5 million on the weekend number 4 slot. Okay, number 5 was Knives Out, from Rian Johnson of Last Jedi fame. 6.1 million, 33% drop. Fantastic. I'm seeing this movie this week with my parents. It's going to be awesome. It's one of those movies where you can get like anybody to show up to go. Somebody mentioned that right when it came out. I was like, this is the movie you go with your parents over the holidays, and that's what we're going to do. So $2,400 per theater. It is starting to lose theaters. This is always the gamble with the holiday release. What you're going to get the long legs of the audience, right? That's off for the holidays. But but you're also going to have problems with like a crowded marketplace where it's losing, 880 theaters this weekend to Star Wars essentially. So and so is Frozen 2. So it's one of those things. It definitely is a bet to come out during the holidays. $89 million so far. That's a win. It's a huge win for Lionsgate. Lionsgate needs wins like that. They're not a huge, massive studio. They also have the number 6 slot Lionsgate. Bombshell is now in wide release, added about 1,500 theaters. It sits at what now? $5 million. Did $5 million this weekend. And remember, it had that limited opening. So it's technically at 5.5 million total domestic. Per theater average was $3,400, which is, people are saying that this is really performing well. I don't see that. Deadline called out maybe this is like The Big Short, same screenwriter that went on to make about $70 million. This could be one of those films, but like I said about Knives Out, it is a really crowded marketplace. And it's winning where Richard Jewell in the 7th spot is not winning. But I don't know how much it's going to win. Because the $3,500 per theater average on this weekend is not great. Because keep in mind, a lot of people have this weekend, everybody has the weekend up, but this is kind of like the start of the holiday was Friday. It's going to be a holiday all the way through from Friday for a good week and a half. So I don't really buy the lower numbers because it's before the holiday. You know what I mean? It's before Christmas because people are off. So I am not seeing a great performance here. I think it's a decent performance. The per theater average is the most alarming part to me. It's only in 1,500 theaters and it's only doing 3,500. That's not good. So I don't know how it's going to leg it out to like 60 or $50 million. I don't see it. Speaking of not legging it out, Richard Jewell in the 7th spot, 2.5 million, 45% drop, which is okay. Per theater average, no theater losses because it's still in the second week. Contracts are, you have to play for 2 weeks for most theaters. Per theater average is $1,000. What the freak? Like this is just a terrible performance for this movie, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I just think people don't remember who Richard Jewell is. I'm 37 years old. I certainly remember who Richard Jewell was, and I was like, the 96 Olympics, so I was probably 14 years old. I wasn't exactly like a news junkie or anything like that, but it was all over the news. I don't know what happened there. Maybe it's the fact that Clint Eastwood doesn't star in his own movie. I don't know. Paul Walter Hauser is not like a household name is an issue perhaps, but I hear it's very good. Critics love it. It's just a weird underperformance. I honestly, what I think it is that obviously I talked about this last weekend. Terrible marketing, awful marketing to it. Just didn't really sell the film. It was shot way too close to release, shot over the summer, so they didn't have a time to really build that sort of. You have to build an audience within sort of the vanguard group, which is film critics, film snobs, film nerds, film art people, and fanboys. Like you have to build a slow burn with that group of people. Then it slowly but surely permeates out to the general audiences. They didn't have time to do that with this. So that's one of the issues. I also think it's just a very overly crowded marketplace right now. It's one of the reasons why I think 1917, which I think is going to be a big movie, said, screw the holidays. We'll put it out so we get awards contention for the Oscars, but we're not putting this thing out wide until January because it's just, there's too much going on. And like, I look at the top 10 and like, I kind of want to see all of these movies. And so if I want to see all of them, I don't see a ton of movies in the theater. That's a bad sign for competition, right? It's too competitive. Okay. So Queen and Slim was in number 8. I think Queen and Slim is it's going to be one of my top 10 box office stories of the year. I'm so surprised by this performance. 1.8 million, lost about 400 theaters. It's at $36 million. To me, that's as big as Hereditary making $40 million whenever it did a couple of years back. Like it's a very artistic, very sort of almost kind of an eccentric vision. I think it was directed by a music video director, I want to say. Kind of like a David Fincher situation when they do music videos and it has that style to it. But just an amazing performance for that film at $36 million domestically. Black Christmas, which I caught a little bit of, kind of a mess. Not really sure what they're thinking. Why you're rebooting this? I talked a lot about this one last weekend. The original is the classic, cult classic, and I don't think anything really touches it. 1.8 million, 58% drop, $686 per theater, $7.2 million. That's a loss for Universal Blumhouse, but their model is 1 out of 10 is a jackpot, or 1 out of 5 probably is more a jackpot, and this is not one of them. I'm sure they'll have their jackpot soon. 10 is Ford versus Ferrari, 1.8 million as well. that has made over $101 million over the weekend. The problem here for Ford versus Ferrari, I mentioned this when it got released, it took advantage of an earlier holiday release, but now it's going to get the downside to that. It just lost 1,400 theaters. It's theatrical run cut in half. It was basically like 2,800 theaters. Now it's at 1,400 theaters. So that really hurts its chances to make a lot more cash. People love the movie. A+ cinema score. It'll play strong all the way through New Year's, no problem. But the fact that it's got its theaters cut in half is going to make it more of a 120 movie versus a 150 movie, I feel like. Outside the top 10, Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, 1.3 million, 60% drop. That somehow made $53 million. I thought that was a $100 million movie. I don't know what happened. It's been a mystery to me the entire time it's been released. I don't get what's going on with it. Everybody I've heard who's seen it said they loved it. Bad rollout, bad marketing from Sony on that one, it feels like. Okay, so that's the top 10 until all the major stuff. There's so many art releases out right now. Hidden Life has been a disastrous release. And this also makes no sense, folks. So last week we talked about this, and it had 10K per theater average on like 2 screens. This week it's in 5 theaters, and its per theater average went up 5x. Now it's 50K per theater. I've heard there's some weird stuff going on. So A Hidden Life, Terrence Malick, he's a genius. Everybody respect. This is a kind of, seems like a return to form. I talked about this last week. Fox Searchlight is now owned by Disney. I hear there's some weird stuff going on with this release, which is probably why we're seeing really odd numbers. Like maybe they were holding screenings and holding back on letting people view the movie or something. That's what it seems like, because it has not changed its theater count, and somehow it went up 400% over the last week. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So something weird's going on with that one. But insanely well reviewed. It doesn't seem like it's gonna break out, but I can't tell because Disney's fucking this movie, so I don't know what's going on. So that one's kind of in limbo. Uncut Gems, also 5 theaters, 46K per theater in its second weekend, which is actually lower than Hidden Life, which is so bizarre. That one's still second weekend, 46K is amazing. Is it going to break out and do well across the country? Probably not. I've seen it. It is amazing. It is just like Good Times. It's awesome. It is a tour de force. Adam Sandler is phenomenal in it. He needs an acting award for it. It's that level of performance. It is just the definition of kinetic filmmaking. Once that thing stops, it will not. It's unbelievable. And so, but I don't think it's not gonna play well. It's too much of a New York-y story. It's too much of an East Coast story. I don't know how much it's gonna make sense to you unless you live or have lived in New York. It has that sort of feel of like things constantly happening, moving from A to B to C to D, and not thinking or stopping at all, just constantly moving through these areas. I just don't think it's gonna play well in the rest of the country, but it's playing well in New York and Los Angeles, which makes sense. Jojo Rabbit, $20 million. Last Christmas at 34. Not an art film, but it's out there. Anything else art wise? Honey Boy never really took off, did 2.8 million so far. Parasite, $21 million. If we start talking about award stuff, I feel like Parasite is doing quite well on all the critic stuff. I still feel like Ford versus Ferrari has the best chance for Best Picture right now. I think your Best Picture shoe-ins are probably from stuff that's released right now. I think Parasite has a slight chance, but probably going to get the foreign language nomination. I think Ford versus Ferrari is definitely the shoe in there. Maybe Bombshell. Uncut Gems, I don't think this guy has a chance. Jojo Rabbit, I don't think has a chance. Joker's still out. Honey Boy doesn't have a chance. It's a weird year. I think we're going to get a lot more of a populist sort of run at the Best Picture. I think there's going to be a lot of well-known films. I don't think we're going to have a Moonlight this year, or like a smaller film that only made like $20 million goes on to win Best Picture. I think it's going to be a little bit more of a sort of big tentpole year for the Best Picture nominations. Okay, so that is everything to talk about in terms of what is out right now. Let's take a look and see what's happening over the next few weeks, because it's, we just got through essentially the busiest release part of the holiday season, but it's not over yet, folks. Because we got Christmas on Wednesday this week. We have Little Women coming out, which I think is going to be massive. I hear we have lots of sellouts already for Little Women on Wednesday. which is amazing and cool. I think it's going to do incredibly well. I know, what does that mean? I don't know, 60 to 100 million. I think it's going to break out totally. Spies in the Skies, I think it's going to do okay. I don't see it doing massive. 1917 does get its limited release on Christmas. Doesn't go wide until later in January, I think January 10th. And then is there anything else? Just Mercy from Warner Brothers. That's an art house sort of potential there. And then I think that's mostly it till the end of the year, which is only a week and a half away. Then we get to January. January is really exciting because there's so much stuff coming out. Grunge comes out on January 3rd. So not this upcoming Friday, the Friday after. That looks like it's going to do quite well. Sony, John Chu, remake of The Grudge. I think it's going to do well. I think it's going to be a nice holiday hangover movie, but I'm also a horror nerd, so that's probably my bias there. Informer, Like a Boss, Underwater, 1917. Just Mercy goes wide from Warner Brothers on the 10th. I think the big one there is probably Underwater is going to looks insane. TJ Miller, Kristen Stewart, and some weird sci-fi underwater horror thriller. Not going to do well. 1917, watch out for that one. As I was thinking of the Best Picture thing, I kind of left out 1917. I get the impression that could be a front runner alongside Ford versus Ferrari. I just get that feeling. It's got the prestige, and Mendes is an amazing director. A phenomenal trailer, one of the best trailers I think I've seen this year. And so, if it sticks the landing with the actual content of the film and does well, and it hits well with the mass audience, that could be up there for Best Picture pretty easily. Then, essentially the end of the holiday period is really going to be kind of the 10th, but then Bad Boys for Life. When that shows up on the 17th, then we're sort of to the winter season, leading then into sort of spring, leading up to sort of the March blockbuster month of spring. Doolittle also comes out. What else in January? Anything else fun? The Gentleman, Run, The Turning. The Turning looks... No, I wasn't thinking about... I'm thinking of Gretel and Hansel. I'm so biased towards horror. It's ridiculous. And the Rhythm Section come on the 31st. Gretel and Hansel looks insane, and I can't wait to see it. And then in February, it almost starts off the spring box office with Birds of Prey on February 7th. It's the Harley Quinn movie with Margot Robbie in the lead. Okay, folks, that is all. I don't know when I'm gonna do a show again. Not that I'm like quitting or anything like that. I'm home for the holidays, not up in Wisconsin for the holidays, I should say. And I probably won't be able to do a show next weekend. What I'll probably do is a end of the year show. We'll have Chris on and do an end of the year show and talk about the top stuff. Maybe we'll do it like New Year's Day. So I'll be gone for probably the next 8 days or so. Appreciate you guys listening. It's been a great year. Love this podcast. Gonna keep doing it forever. So thank you for listening, and I will see you in the new year.